The crystal chandeliers of the Langford estate glimmered like frozen rain, casting gold light across the marble floor. It was the kind of house that made silence feel expensive, the kind of place where footsteps echoed authority. Miles Langford, 36, stood in the foyer that morning adjusting his cufflinks, preparing for another high-profile board meeting. To the world, he was the perfect image of success, the billionaire heir to Langford Holdings, a man who had everything: wealth, charm, and a fiancée that every magazine called the envy of New York. Her name was Vanessa Corbin, a statuesque beauty from a family of diplomats. She had the grace of royalty and the smile of a woman who knew the world revolved around her. Or so she believed. The mansion staff moved quietly in her presence, each one careful not to disturb her perfect mornings. But there was one person Vanessa never failed to notice, and not kindly: Amara Bennett. Amara had been the Langford family maid for nearly 8 years. In her mid-40s, with deep brown skin and soft eyes that seemed to hold entire lifetimes, she worked with the kind of quiet dignity that came from pain long endured. She wasn't just an employee. She was a presence, constant, dependable, invisible when needed, but fiercely loyal. That morning, as she polished the banister, she heard voices rising from the parlor. "You need to understand, Miles," Vanessa said sharply. "Your mother doesn't belong here. She's not exactly what your guests expect to see." Amara froze. Miles's mother, Eleanor Langford, was a gentle soul, frail now, her memory slipping after years of illness. Amara adored her. While the rest of the household treated Eleanor like a fragile inconvenience, Amara sat with her, read to her, and sometimes sang softly in the evenings. Miles's voice was calm, tired. "Vanessa, she's my mother. This is her home." Vanessa's heels clicked against the marble as she moved closer to him. "Miles, I'm marrying you, not your mother's problems. You know what the press will say when they see her wandering around in that state during the engagement party? It's embarrassing." Amara's heart tightened. She didn't mean to listen, but she couldn't walk away. Vanessa lowered her voice, but not her cruelty. "If you want a future with me, Miles, you need to start thinking about appearances." Miles didn't answer immediately. His silence spoke volumes. Amara turned back to her work, her chest heavy. She had seen this before. The rich trying to hide the broken things, even when those broken things were the ones who once built them. Part 2. What the maid saw that afternoon. Eleanor was sitting in her favorite chair by the garden window, humming faintly to herself. The sunlight fell across her silver hair as Amara brought in a tray of tea. "Thank you, dear," Eleanor said, her voice trembling but kind. "You're welcome, ma'am," Amara replied softly, placing the tray down. "Would you like me to read today?" Eleanor smiled. "Only if it's something happy." But before she could open the book, the door burst open. Vanessa stepped in, her tone sharp as glass. "You can't be sitting here, Eleanor. We're having a photo team come in for tomorrow's party. This area needs to be cleared." Eleanor blinked, confused. "Cleared? But this is where I always sit." Vanessa snatched the teacup from the table, spilling some onto the rug. "Well, now it's not. Go to your room, please." "You can sit there." Amara rose instantly. "Miss Vanessa, please, she's not feeling well." Vanessa's eyes cut toward her. "Did I ask for your opinion, Maid?" The word landed like a slap. Eleanor's hands trembled. "It's all right, Amara," she whispered. But it wasn't. Something in Amara's chest burned. It wasn't just disrespect. It was cruelty, deliberate and cold. Vanessa turned her back, already issuing commands to a decorator on her phone, as though neither woman existed. Amara helped Eleanor to her room in silence, tears glinting at the corners of her eyes. "Don't you cry for me," Eleanor whispered. "Some people only understand kindness when they lose it." That night, Miles returned home late. The party planners were gone, the lights dimmed. He noticed the broken teacup still in the trash bin, a rare thing in this pristine home. "Amara," he asked quietly when he found her finishing dishes in the kitchen. "Was something wrong today?" She hesitated, torn between loyalty and conscience. "Mr. Langford, I don't want to overstep, please," he said, his voice gentle. "Tell me." And so she did. Carefully, respectfully, every word measured, every emotion suppressed until her eyes glistened. Miles listened, jaw tightening. silence wrapping the kitchen like fog. When she finished, he simply nodded and left without a word. Upstairs, he found Vanessa pouring herself wine. "You embarrassed my mother?" he asked quietly. She looked up, feigning confusion. "What are you talking about?" "The tea, the shouting. Amara told me everything." Vanessa's mask slipped. "Oh, for God's sake, Miles, don't tell me you're taking the maid's word over mine." He took a slow breath. "If you're the woman I thought you were, I shouldn't have to." Then he walked out, leaving her stunned in silence. The next evening, the mansion shimmered with preparations for the engagement gala. Florists filled the halls with white roses, and the staff moved quickly under Vanessa's watchful eye. Yet beneath the music and polish, the house felt cold. Eleanor had been ordered to stay upstairs. When Amara brought her dinner tray, the old woman smiled weakly. "They think I'm too fragile to be seen," she said. "You are beautiful just as you are," Amara whispered. Downstairs, Miles was still at work, finalizing a major merger before the event. Vanessa, already dressed in silver satin, paced the hall, barking orders. When she saw Amara coming down the stairs, she hissed, "Make sure that woman doesn't wander out. If she ruins tonight, Mrs. Langford won't ruin anything," Amara said, unable to hold back this time. "She raised this family long before you came." Vanessa's eyes flashed. "You forget your place." The orchestra began tuning in the ballroom. Guests started to arrive. Vanessa plastered on her radiant smile and floated among them like a queen. For an hour, the illusion of perfection held, until the sound of soft footsteps echoed down the stairs. Eleanor. She wore a pale blue dress from years ago, her posture uncertain, but her eyes bright. "I wanted to congratulate my son," she said, voice trembling. The guests turned politely. Some smiled, others looked away. Vanessa's face stiffened. She crossed the room quickly. "Mrs. Langford," she whispered through clenched teeth, "you shouldn't be here. I just wanted to see Miles. Please go back upstairs." "You're making a scene." The words cut deep enough, but then, when Eleanor hesitated, Vanessa grabbed her arm. Hard. The glass in Eleanor's hand shattered. She gasped in pain. For a heartbeat, the music kept playing. Then it stopped. Amara had seen it all from the doorway. Before she even thought she was there between them, her hand catching Vanessa's wrist mid-motion. "Enough," she said, her voice low but thunderous in the silence. Vanessa froze, stunned that a maid had dared touch her. "How dare you? Don't speak another word to her," Amara said, guiding Eleanor gently away. "You've done enough harm tonight," the guests murmured. Cameras flashed. Then another voice came from the doorway. "Vanessa, Miles." He had arrived just in time to see the scene, his mother's bleeding palm. Amara shielding her, Vanessa's hand still raised in fury. His expression hardened into something colder than anger. "I saw everything." Vanessa's lips parted. "Miles, leave." His voice was quiet, final. "Right now." She tried to protest, but the crowd's eyes and the truth between them ended it. Vanessa turned, humiliated, and stormed out, her designer heels echoing against the marble like a retreating drumbeat. Amara wrapped Eleanor's hand in a napkin, her own trembling. "I'm sorry, ma'am," she whispered. Miles knelt beside them. "Don't apologize," he said softly. "You did what I should have done long ago." Part 3. The morning after. The story spread across the city within hours. Billionaire breaks off engagement. After Fiancée humiliates his mother, Maid defends. Miles ignored the calls from reporters. His only concern was his mother, resting comfortably thanks to Amara's steady care. When he found her the next morning, Eleanor was smiling faintly. "She's a brave woman," she told him. "The kind that stands up when others look away." Later that day, Miles asked Amara to join him in the garden. "I don't think I've thanked you properly," he said. "You don't need to." "Sir, I do." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "You reminded me what strength looks like. It's not in money or power, it's in compassion." He then did something no one expected. At the next press conference, standing before a wall of cameras, he announced a new initiative in his company's name, the Bennett Foundation, dedicated to protecting and supporting caregivers and working women across the city. And when reporters asked why, he smiled. Because one act of courage can change everything. Epilogue. The final game months later, the Langford estate was quieter. Eleanor painted again. Her laughter echoed through the halls. Amara still worked there, though now her uniform had been replaced by a tailored suit. She served as the foundation's community director. One evening, Miles found her setting tea for his mother. "You know," he said with a warm smile, "Mother says you saved us both that night," Amara chuckled. "I just did what was right," he nodded. "That's exactly what makes it unforgettable." Outside, the city lights shimmered like scattered stars. Inside, 3 people shared quiet tea: a billionaire, his mother, and the woman whose kindness had rewritten what power truly meant. Because in a world obsessed with status, it was the maid's courage, the unthinkable act of standing up for love and dignity, that became the richest legacy of all. 2 years passed. The Bennett Foundation had grown beyond anything Miles imagined. What began as a single grant for caregivers now funded education programs, shelters, and small business loans for women across the state. Its message was simple but powerful. Kindness is strength. Amara became its heart. Her speeches were quiet but unforgettable. She spoke from truth, not theory. Crowds listened when she said, "I was a maid once, but I learned that dignity has no uniform." Every act of compassion changes the world around us, even if no one notices at first. She didn't seek recognition, but she earned it anyway. Her face began appearing in magazines and newspapers, standing beside Miles at charity events, always graceful, always humble. Still, what mattered most to her was the small, quiet moments. The children she helped get into school, the mothers she comforted, and the way Eleanor smiled every morning when she came into the room. A visit from the past one rainy afternoon. A letter arrived addressed to Miles. The handwriting was familiar, delicate, but sharp. Vanessa. She wrote from a private clinic overseas. Time and regret had softened her once arrogant tone. She confessed that losing everything had forced her to see who she had become. "I've had years to think," the letter read, "and I realized it wasn't your mother who ruined me. It was my pride. If you see Amara, tell her I'm sorry. I hope she keeps doing what I never could, see people for who they are." Miles folded the letter quietly. He didn't reply. Some stories didn't need to be reopened, but he placed the letter in a box labeled "The Night That Changed Everything," where it stayed as a reminder that redemption begins with truth. The garden promised spring returned to the estate, bringing life back to every corner. Eleanor's garden bloomed with lilies and tulips, and the old chessboard Miles once shared with his late father sat beneath the oak tree once more. One evening, as the sun set over the horizon, Amara found Miles there, sleeves rolled up, studying the board. "You still lose too easily," she teased, smiling as she sat across from him. He laughed. "I keep hoping you'll let me win one day. You'll have to earn that." They played for a while in companionable silence. The warm air smelled of earth and lilacs. Finally, Miles looked up from the board. "You know, Amara, when I think about that night, I realize something." "What's that?" "You didn't just protect my mother. You saved me, too. You reminded me what it means to be human." Amara's eyes softened. "We all need saving sometimes, even those who seem to have everything." They shared a quiet smile, one that spoke of trust, understanding, and something deeper that neither dared to name. Legacy years later, people across the city would speak of the Bennett Foundation not just as an institution, but as a movement. Its success was never measured in numbers, but in stories of women finding courage, of families rebuilt, of children dreaming again. And behind every speech and celebration stood Amara, the woman who once wore a maid's apron and changed the destiny of a billionaire's family. When Eleanor passed peacefully at 93, the city gathered to honor her life. At the service, Miles read from his mother's favorite poem, one about light finding its way through cracks. Afterward, he and Amara stood together beneath the old oak tree. "She would have been proud," Amara said softly. Miles nodded. "She already was." He turned to her. "You know, Amara, when people ask about the success of this foundation, I always tell them one thing. It started with one act of courage." Amara smiled through her tears. And one broken glass. They laughed. And for the first time in years, the mansion felt full of life again. Final scene. As the night settled over the city, the lights from the Langford estate glowed like a lighthouse on the hill. Not a symbol of wealth, but of renewal. Inside, on the mantel, stood a photograph, Eleanor, smiling between Miles and Amara, chessboard between them, sunlight on their faces. Underneath, a plaque read, "Kindness is power. Compassion is legacy." And for those who knew the story, of a maid who stood against cruelty, a son who learned humility, and a family reborn through courage, those words said everything. Because sometimes, the most unthinkable act isn't born of rebellion, it's born of love. 10 years later, the Bennett Foundation had grown into a nationwide force for good, funding schools, shelters, and community programs that bore one name across every wall: the Amara Jackson Initiative for Human Dignity. The woman who once scrubbed floors in silence was now standing before thousands at a conference in Washington, D.C. Cameras flashed, but Amara remained the same, humble, poised, her voice carrying warmth instead of pride. "People often ask me," she said, smiling, "how a maid ended up running a foundation with a billionaire. But I don't see it that way. I wasn't lifted up by anyone. I was simply seen, and that's something everyone deserves." The crowd rose to its feet in applause. Miles stood at the edge of the stage, his eyes shining. He had never stopped being proud, not of what she'd done, but of who she had always been. Later that night, after the event, they returned to the hotel balcony overlooking the Potomac River. The city lights shimmered like fireflies against the water. Miles poured them both tea, a ritual they had adopted from Eleanor's old evenings in the garden. Amara leaned on the railing, gazing out. "It's strange, isn't it? Sometimes I still dream of that first night. The shouting, the broken glass. I wake up thinking I'm back in that kitchen." Miles set his cup down. "But look where that moment led us," she nodded. A single act of courage. One choice to speak up instead of stay silent. He smiled softly. "That's the thing about you, Amara. You never saw it as courage, just compassion. That's what makes it powerful." They stood together, quiet, listening to the hum of the city below, the sound of life, of progress, of second chances. Months later, when Amara was preparing a new initiative for single mothers, she received a letter in a familiar script. Faint, shaky, but sincere. It was from Vanessa. "Dear Amara, I know I can never undo what I did that night, but I've spent these years trying to understand the woman I was, the one so afraid of losing control that she hurt others to keep it. I've seen your work. You've turned your pain into something extraordinary. I'm sorry, not just for what I did, but for not being strong enough to be like you. Vanessa." Amara read the letter quietly, then folded it and placed it in the same box where Miles had kept the old note. The night that changed everything. This time, she added a single white lily on top. Forgiveness. Full circle, one golden afternoon. Amara returned to the Langford estate with Miles. The garden had changed, the flowers bloomed brighter, and the path was lined with memorial stones, honoring the foundation's first scholarship recipients. In the center stood a bronze sculpture of Eleanor Bennett, seated peacefully with her favorite teacup in hand. At her feet, a small inscription read, "To those who serve with love, you are never invisible." Amara knelt and brushed the dust from the plaque. "She'd be proud of you, Miles." He smiled faintly. "She'd be proud of you." As they walked toward the house, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm orange glow across the garden. The old chessboard, now protected under glass, still sat beneath the oak tree. Two pieces remained in mid-play, a queen and a king. Amara stopped and smiled. "You never finish the game." Miles looked at her. "Maybe that's the point. Some games aren't meant to end. They're meant to remind us who we're playing for." She took his hand gently. "Then let's keep playing." The closing moment, the wind stirred the flowers, carrying the faint scent of lilies and sunlight. Somewhere in that stillness, the echoes of Eleanor's laughter seemed to linger, soft, approving, eternal. And there, in the fading light, stood a man who had once lost everything to arrogance and found everything again through kindness. and a woman who had once been invisible but became unforgettable. Together, they proved a simple, timeless truth. The sky over Manhattan was painted in gold and gray as the city prepared to sleep. In a penthouse overlooking Central Park, Amara Jackson Bennett sat by the window, watching raindrops slide down the glass like liquid silver. The city below buzzed with motion, cabs, laughter, horns. But in her world, there was peace. It had been 15 years since that night that changed everything. She had gone from mopping marble floors to standing on stages, building scholarships and running programs across the nation. The Jackson Initiative had grown into a global movement, a symbol of second chances and unseen heroes. But tonight, her hands trembled slightly as she turned the page of an old scrapbook. There, in faded ink, was a photograph, her in her blue maid's uniform, standing awkwardly beside Miles in the Varelli ballroom. The night he first introduced her to the world. She smiled softly. "Feels like a lifetime ago," she whispered. From behind her, a familiar voice replied, "It was a lifetime ago. And still the best move I ever made." Miles entered the room, now with streaks of silver in his dark hair, a calmness that came from years of wisdom, and love that had deepened, not dimmed. He set down 2 cups of tea, the same blend his mother, Eleanor, used to drink. "You're thinking about her again," he said gently. Amara nodded. "And Vanessa, too. Funny how even the people who hurt us shape us." Miles took her hand. "You forgave her when I couldn't. That's what makes you extraordinary." Amara smiled. "Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means moving forward." The visit the next morning. Amara arrived at the Bennett Foundation's Harlem Center, a new branch built in the heart of the community, where her own mother once worked double shifts just to afford rent. Children's laughter echoed down the halls. On the walls hung murals painted by local artists, scenes of unity, hope, and resilience. As she passed the reception, a young woman stood up nervously. "Mrs. Bennett?" she said. "My name's Vanessa Thompson. I don't know if you remember me." Amara paused. The name hit her like a bell. Vanessa? Her heart quickened. But no, this wasn't that Vanessa. This girl was in her early 20s with dark curls and eyes full of uncertainty. "My mother was..." "Vanessa Langford," the young woman continued quietly. "She passed away last year." Amara blinked, emotion flooding her chest. "Oh, my dear, I didn't know." Vanessa handed her a small, worn envelope. "She asked me to deliver this to you if anything happened to her. She said you'd understand." Amara took the letter and sat down. The handwriting was unmistakable, elegant, looping, trembling with age. "Amara, I've spent my final years trying to become the woman I should have been when we met. I've opened a shelter in Savannah, using what's left of my family inheritance to house women escaping abuse. I learned what you tried to teach me, that worth doesn't come from wealth, but from love. If my daughter ever finds you, please help her see the world not through my eyes, but through yours, Vanessa." Amara's throat tightened. She looked up at the young woman. "She was proud of you, wasn't she?" The girl nodded, tears brimming. She tried her best to make things right. Amara reached across the table, taking her hand. "Then let me help you continue her work." The legacy weeks later, the Bennett Foundation launched a new branch, the Langford Project, dedicated to supporting abused women and single mothers rebuilding their lives. Vanessa became its first program director, trained personally by Amara. Reporters loved the story. Billionaire's wife honors late fiancé's daughter in act of redemption. But for Amara, it wasn't about headlines. It was about healing the last scar left from that dark night. Miles stood beside her during the ribbon-cutting ceremony, his arm around her shoulder. "You always know how to turn pain into purpose," he whispered. Amara smiled. "Life's just a chessboard, Miles. Every mistake is another move waiting to be made." He chuckled. "Then you've been playing the longest, most beautiful game I've ever seen." The twist months later, Amara received a call from Marcus, her son, now a young attorney working in Chicago. "Mom, I've been invited to speak at the Global Justice Summit," he said excitedly. "They want me to talk about your work." Amara's eyes welled with tears. "My work? Sweetheart, you've made your own name." Marcus laughed. "Because you taught me how. You didn't just raise me, Mom. You showed me that the greatest power is compassion." The night of his speech, Amara and Miles sat in the front row as Marcus stood before a sea of leaders, entrepreneurs, and young dreamers. His voice was steady, strong. "My mother wasn't born powerful," he said. "She was born human. She made her mistakes, she faced her storms, but she stood up. Not for herself, but for others. That's what power truly is." The crowd erupted into applause. Miles leaned over and whispered, "He gets that from you." Amara smiled, wiping a tear. "No, he gets that from all of us." The final scene years later, long after both their names became symbols of change, a young janitor at the Bennett headquarters paused one night by a framed photograph on the wall. It showed Amara and Miles, older now, sitting across from each other at a chessboard, smiling. Below the photo, an inscription read, "It doesn't matter where you start on the board, only that you play with heart." Amara Jackson Bennett, the janitor, smiled softly, set down his mop and whispered, "One day, I'll make my move too." Outside, the city lights gleamed like promises. The rain began to fall again, softly, like the night it all began, ending. Message kindness doesn't just change one life. It creates ripples that never end. Sometimes the most powerful people are those who simply choose to care.